Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cinema Mancuso, and this is Notes on the News. I'm Peter Mancuso, and this is the show where I break down the biggest stories in film, media, entertainment, and give you my thoughts. If you join us live, super happy to have you. If at any point during the show you have any comments or questions about any of the topics I'm going to be covering, feel free to drop them in the live chat. Have it pulled up here. Going to do my best to kind of keep an eye on it. It would be cool if we can kind of get a conversation started, so it doesn't feel like I'm just speaking into the void like I usually am. If you haven't already, please like this video. It really helps with engagement and the algorithm and people finding the channel. So if you have found the channel, why not subscribe? I'm trying to grow this community as best as I can here. If you're watching this after the fact, still super happy to have you. If at any point you want to jump around, by the time you're watching this, you should be able to go down to the description, and there should be time codes there, so you can kind of jump around at your leisure. We stream this show every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and same deal as before. If you haven't already, please like this video, and do not forget to subscribe. Okay, let's take a look at the box office from this past week. Total domestic box office was a little under 74 million, which was about a 42% drop. So, typically the weekend of the Oscars is usually not a super, a super big or super busy time for the box office. And that is reflected here with only one new movie breaking it into the top 10. Last Breath, this is the Woody Harrelson-led, based on a true story, kind of thriller underwater, like deep diving and getting trapped down there. And it's actually directed by the person who did the documentary on the same subject. It brought in about 7.8 million, which is good because it not only exceeded the lower end of the projections, it actually exceeded my target, which was 6.3, right? So it definitely, was able to hit what people were expecting of it. The concern, of course, though, is that it was made for almost $24 million. So it's still very much in the red here. And again, that's always the name of the game, that, projections, a film can meet projections, but if your expectations are really low, that doesn't necessarily say much if it meets or even exceeds expectations, right? And again, it's made a little bit worldwide, but as you can see, there's a little bit of a difference here between the domestic and worldwide. But this is primarily a domestic film right now. But most of this top 10 here is I don't want to say exactly the same because there is some shuffling here, right? But what is the same are our first two, right? So. At number 2, in its second week now, we have The Monkey, Osgood Perkins' follow-up to Longlegs, which of course was a semi-box office powerhouse, just that, it didn't make a gajillion dollars, but it just, considering it was made for fairly cheap, and it just kept making money week after week after week. So that percent return was really strong, right? It brought in about 10.6 million, which was only a 24% drop. So that's a really good second week drop. It'll be interesting to see, will this double or replicate the success that Longlegs had? Worldwide, it's now up to around 30 million off of $11 million budget. So it's already profitable, right? It would be really cool again, though, to see, to see this still be in the top 10 week after week after week and just get, because I think like Longlegs ended up with something like 1,000% return or even more, like something crazy, right? Can't say the same necessarily for The Unbreakable Boy. This is not doing particularly well this week. It actually jumped a spot, 2 spots actually. So it's having a little bit of some improvement here. Improvement's the wrong word, because in the name of the game is losing the least amount of money, right, week to week. Because typically, unless there's a very specific reason, you expand to more theaters, barring some weird example like that, typically a movie is always going to be going down week after week. But it actually jumped 2 spaces from 10th to 8th place in its second week now, brought in about 2.2 million, only an 8% drop. So again, didn't really have far to go, right? Because it didn't really make much last week, but that is worth noting here. So far now worldwide, it's brought in about 4.5 million. We don't have any budget numbers, but I would imagine this is very much in the red, considering just how expensive any movie is now. How expensive any movie is to make nowadays, but especially a movie like this, because Zachary Levi, while he's kind of totaled his own career, he's still like a star. He's still a name, right? So I would imagine he's still able to command, like maybe, I don't even know how much money, but I would imagine that this movie is very much in the red, right? Going back up to the very top here, number one, still in number one in its third week, Captain America: Brave New World. Big drop, right? So 57% drop. Last week, I was expecting a much bigger drop, because usually when a film has the kind of word of mouth that this film has, usually you see this huge mammoth, falls off a cliff, kind of. But it was able to kind of stop the bleeding a little bit because last week benefited, because I do it weekly. I don't just focus on the weekend. I try to look at the whole week, and it benefited from having President's Day as the beginning of that time period, of that weekly period. So it was able to kind of mitigate the money that it lost, the following weekend. But now there is no such long weekend. So this is a pretty big drop, 57%. This brings its worldwide total to about $342 million off a $180 million budget. So not a huge flop necessarily. Again, it's crossed that initial threshold of making back the budget. But ideally, we want to see it get to 100 because, the budget doesn't include marketing and advertising. So, the issue with something like this is just looking at how expensive it was to make. And considering, the MCU films of yesteryear, I was going to say MCU films usually, but really we haven't had now when an MCU movie does really well, it's the exception, right? That proves the rule. So even if this film ends up getting in that green on that, in that far right column here, I think it's still going to be seen as the disappointment for Disney. And, it's going to be interesting to see, again, how Fantastic Four does, right? Or even Thunderbolts, right? But I feel like that's just more of the same, even if it's going to be more fun or maybe more focused on the characters. It's still going to be like a very similar kind of thing that we've seen before, whereas Fantastic Four, is going to be giving us something that, we haven't had a Fantastic Four movie in like a decade, and we've never really had a good one. And from based on the trailer, it looks like it's going to be pretty good, I think. I feel confident in calling it. It's going to be like a net positive movie, right? Still looking here in the top 5, Paddington Peru dropping from 3rd to 4th place. Brought a little over 6 million, so a pretty big drop here, 51%. But this movie's already been playing, worldwide before opening here. So it's already, in the green. It's already made back its budget. Again, Paddington's never been super big here. Again, I didn't even know Paddington existed until the first film came out, and I didn't even see the movie. I was just like, oh, what is this about? And then I saw the thing, like, based off of the beloved children's book, and I was like, I've never heard of this before. So it makes sense that it's not going to do huge numbers here, but at this point, just kind of keeping the brand alive and trying to squeeze every dollar out of the franchise as they can, right? Dogman dropping from 4th to 5th place here in its 5th week, so it's been here for over a month now, bringing in about 5.4 million. Again, pretty big drop, 55%. But it's in the green. It's one of those things that I think at this point, it's just about making every dollar that it can. And speaking of making every dollar that you can, Mufasa the Lion King in its 11th week. 11th, actually jumped a spot from 7th to 6th place. Brought in about 2.7 million. Pretty much performed exactly like the rest of the box office, exactly at 42%. And this movie has just been the little engine that could. It just keeps going. The week after week after week. It's not a huge percent return because it was still a fairly expensive movie to make. But considering that the film got pretty middling reception, the fact that it was really strengthened by the fact there's not like a lot of direct competition for it, and the fact that it opened right around Christmas time, and then like following Christmas, it's just like a dead zone for the box office. So if you can be like a big movie that can get families to come more than once in this time period, you're gonna make a lot of money, right? And so worldwide, it's made over $700 million, which again, considering I guess the quality of the film and the word of mouth of the film, that's really, really impressive, right? Just doing a couple notes here. One of them, Days, again, also having really strong legs, really strong endurance, if you will. Dropping from 8th to 9th place, a little under 1.5 million. A better percent drop than the entire box office. But again, it's just been holding really, really well. It's brought in about 47 million, a $14 million budget. So again, while not huge worldwide numbers, the percent return, in my opinion, is really the most important thing. How many dollars are you getting back for every $1 you spend, right? So, if they just made, instead of making one $140 million movie, they should just make 10 of these, and you could diversify the risk a little bit. And then, interestingly here, we have a complete unknown. This has not been in the top 10 for a while. It actually jumped from 13th to 10th place. Now in its 10th week, so it's kind of been slowly just kind of lurking in the background, brought in about 1.3 million, only a 10% drop though, so it's definitely been a movie that has benefited from the award season, right? That's a big part of, the reason why studios care about awards so much is that the prestige of them drives people to go see the movie. Or rent it, or depending on the timing of, right? Because if it came out way earlier in the year. But that's also partly why so many Oscar movies, Oscar seasons near the end of the year. One, because the filmmakers want the film to be fresh in the mind of Oscar voters. But then, not unrelatedly, kind of in tandem with that, so that then when it gets nominated for stuff like the Golden Globes, and especially the Oscars, it's still in theaters. And people can now go see it. And that always gives films like this a bump. And frankly, I'm surprised not more movies are here that were kind of awards movies. But maybe it's just because, Complete Unknown was released very, very late in the year. It was released, I think, on Christmas Day. So, it has... it makes sense that it might still be in theaters, whereas some of these other movies came out maybe earlier in the fall or even earlier in the year, right? But again, the legs have been very good. It's made, almost $120 million worldwide off of a $60 million budget. So it's just barely there, just barely below that 100%. And I don't know if we're going to be talking about this movie next week. I don't know if it'll stay in the top 10, but I'm sure that it's going to cross that threshold. Where are we? Okay, and looking ahead to this upcoming weekend, we have Mickey 17, Bong Joon-ho's, follow-up to Parasite, right? This is one of his English language films. He has kind of a mixture of both. I haven't seen a bunch of Bong Joon-ho films. I think all I've seen is Parasite and Memories of Murder. And I much prefer Memories of Murder. I found Parasite good, but overrated. And from my understanding, people who even like him all agree that his English language films are usually weaker. But this one seems pretty interesting. It's been getting pretty good reviews. The premise is Robert Pattinson plays a guy named Mickey, I guess. And he has a job where basically he goes in to do stuff where he's going to die, but he gets cloned. So he's the 17th version of himself. This is projected to have a pretty small opening, only around 10 to 25 million. I'm going to put the target around 18.2. Again, it's not gonna, I think, set the world on fire, and I can't imagine it's gonna have a Parasite level of attention, right? And also we have a Christian film. I don't know if it's Christian necessarily, but it's made by Angel Studios, I think, which is the Sound of Freedom distributor. Rule Breakers. It's about the first all-female robotics team in Afghanistan, which sounds like an interesting premise. But from my understanding, the movie isn't particularly, it's kind of just mediocre. Again, very small projection here, around 3 to 6. I'm gonna put my target around 4.3. Again, we still have yet to really get to the period where we're gonna get bigger movies. Okay, before moving on, I just want to give a quick plug. I actually just started a new YouTube channel. So if you're watching this and you like this channel, I highly recommend you go check out Replay Rewind. 1,000 video games across 50 years of gaming history. My goal is to try to play them all. Can I do it before I die? Well, we're going to find out. It's been a lot of fun. I just recently played the Atari 1976 game Breakout. That video is going to be going up probably sometime this week. It's been a lot of fun already. I'm only 4 in, so still a long way to go, but I would definitely, really appreciate if you could go at least just check that channel out. I don't know how long this journey is going to take me, but journeys are always better with others. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Sometimes I spill it on myself. I'm just so thirsty. Okay, let's talk about story number 1. So the 97th Academy Awards aired this past Sunday. It was hosted by Conan O'Brien. It aired on ABC and Hulu. Though arguably Hulu, because as we'll talk about, there was a lot of technical issues. And it brought in about a little over 18 million viewers, which is about 7 or 8% down from last year. So not a huge drop, but, definitely you would want to see increase, especially since the Oscars has just been on a downward trend, viewership wise, for years. You could argue decades, but really years, right? So, not great, but at least it stopped the bleeding just a little bit. So I'm not going to go through every single award, but I just like to kind of briefly run through in case you're living under a rock. If in case some reason you are someone who cares, yet you don't already know, I'm going to just go over the major winners, just so we're all on the same page. So best writing for adapted screenplay went to Conclave. Best writing for original screenplay went to Anora. Best actor in a supporting role went to Kieran Culkin for his role in A Real Pain. Best actress in a supporting role went to Zoe Saldana for her role in Amelia Perez. Best actor in a leading role went to Adrian Brody for his role in The Brutalist. Best actress in a leading role went to Mikey Madison for her role in Anora. Best directing went to Sean Baker for Anora. And then Best Picture went to Anora. So you're hearing Anora a lot, right? So looking at kind of the scorecard of the films that won 2 or more awards, we had Wicked with 2 wins, Amelia Perez with 2 wins, Doom Part 2 with 2 wins. Really, Doom Part 2 and Wicked should have swept, but whatever. The Brutalist with 3, and then topping them out, Anora at 5 awards for, like I mentioned. So best original screenplay, best editing as well, best director, best actress, and then best picture, right? By studio, those 5 awards are also going to Neon, right? Because Neon's the one that distributed Anora. But then we also have Warner Brothers with 2, Universal with 2, Netflix with 3, A24 with 3, and like I said, Neon with 5. So let's talk about some of the highlights of the broadcast. Because it's not just an award ceremony. It's not just an award ceremony. It is also a television special, right? It's a spectacle, if you will. A night to celebrate movie making. So first off, I really want to just give Conan O'Brien his flowers. He was fantastic. I did a video about him hosting the Oscars back when it was first announced, and I said, and I'm not like a huge Conan fan in the sense that I've never really watched his show. Like, I'll see clips, but whenever I see anything from this guy, it's always just so nutritious. And when I mean by nutritious is when I talk about like content being nutritious, it's like I feel like I'm getting the nutrients I'm looking for, or the nutrients that it should be giving me, right? So something being nutritious doesn't mean that it's super thematic and heavy or whatever. It just means that for what it's trying to be, it doesn't feel like junk food, right? His brand of comedy and his insights and perspectives on things is always just like a little bit more, is like on another dimension than like maybe some of his peers, right? So I was really excited to see him do this, and I think he not only pulled it off, but I think he exceeded my expectations. He was able to balance, really cutting, incisive comedy and maybe, jokes that induce some groans from the audience, kind of like, oh, I can't believe he just said that. But he was able to balance that with a obvious and apparent sincere respect for the art form in the medium, right? And again, he's just a truly one-of-a-kind comedic talent. And some of his bits were hysterical, big sound like this was hysterical. But I mean, it got me to laugh, and it got the room. I had an Oscar party with a bunch of our friends came over, and he had us laughing a lot. Just a few notable ones. He made a joke like, fun fact, Anora, Mikey Madison and Nora says the F word like 400 and something times or whatever. That's 3 more times than Carla Sofia Gason's publicist. And everyone went, oh! And then like it literally cut to Carla in the audience, which was interesting. He also, about halfway through, came up on stage and went, well, we're at the halfway mark, which means it's time for Kendrick Lamar to come out and call Drake a pedophile. And he said that. And everyone went, oh! And he went like, it's okay, I'm lawyered up. Like, so like, kind of like that kind of stuff. And then he also at one point came, because they honored the firefighters in California who fought the wildfires recently, had them come out. And because this is his genius, because he's able to take something that theoretically you can't joke about and find a way to do it where, like, even the most, like, pearl clutchy people have to go, like, okay, that was kind of funny. So he, like, had really, offensive's the wrong word, but, like, very controversial jokes. He had them say it, like the firefighters, and he was like, and you all have to laugh because they're heroes. And one of them was, like, the fire chief of LA or whatever it was like, our hearts go out to everyone, all the filmmakers who lost their homes. And of course I'm talking about the producers of Joker 2. Right? So like things like that. And got groans, but I think everyone, was game for it. So he was just really, really great. Some really good performances this year. So there were no best original song performances showcased like you usually have. The broadcast opened up with Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande, because I think the Academy was like, shit, we have to get them to perform, even though, obviously none of the songs in that movie are nominated because they're not original songs. It's just based off of a musical. So it starts off with Ariana Grande singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow from Wizard of Oz, of course. Then Cynthia Erivo goes into a song from The Wiz. I'm sorry I can't name drop the song because I don't really know The Wiz all that well. All I know is he's on down the road, which showed up later. And then the two of them joined together to sing like the last half of Defying Gravity. And both Erivo and Grande are powerhouses. But Cynthia she just brought the house down right at the start. Like it really just shows you how bad we've had it when it comes to movie musicals, because she's not just great in the movie. Like she is gonna raise the roof, as the kids would say. And again, it's a shame that the film, and particularly her performance, were so quickly forgotten. I really thought that Wicked would be the one to sweep this award season. And that obviously did not come to pass. The broadcast also included a James Bond tribute. It was very well done, but it was just very random. Supposedly, it was done to reflect the honorary Oscars that were given to the producers of the Bond franchise, Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson. The honorary Oscars that were given to them at the Governor's Awards earlier this spring. But they did not make that clear, or maybe they did, and the people at my part, we were just talking, not paying attention. Margaret Qualley was in it and got to dance. She is a dancer. She wasn't nominated for her role in The Substance, so it was nice to have her do a little something, I suppose. And then there were musical performances that, of different artists singing famous Bond songs. You had Lisa, right, the K-pop sensation. You had Doja Cat, and you had Ray, who I've never heard of before this. And all the young people at the party were like, oh, that's Ray. And I was like, nah, I don't know. I'm too old. I mentioned earlier that they did perform Ease On Down the Road from The Wiz as a tribute to Quincy Jones, who had passed away earlier this year. Queen Latifah, of all people, came out and did this song. One of the stranger bits was the In Memoriam section, which is always, a thankless task, right? Because the people will always get left out, which of course happened this year. Michelle Trachtenberg, Tony Todd, Olivia Hussey, all these people, famous people, or at least recognizable people, were excluded, right? But then they for the music, I remember one year it was Lady Gaga singing Over the Rainbow, and it was like really touching. This year they had a choir sing Mozart's Requiem. Lacrimosa. It made it feel really ominous. And I saw a tweet that was like, this is the kind of music you would perform if you're trying to resurrect these people. Like, it just felt really weird, and I think everyone was kind of weirded out. But Mozart's Requiem is a great piece of music. It just felt like a weird mismatch. But then one of the most annoying things about this was Hulu, which is how we watched it. Because every year, because I don't have cable, every year I gotta download the ABC app on my Fire TV and sign in using my parents' Cox cable and sign in with their thing so I'm able to access it. And that usually sucks too. Like, there'll always be glitches. And I remember last year, it literally, like, the broadcast, like, just went down for, like, 10 minutes. Or at least the Fire app version of it, right? So this year, when they announced that it was going to also simulcast on Hulu, the way that the Super Bowl was both on Fox Sports and Tubi, I was like, okay, this is great, right? This solves all my problems. But no, it had a bunch of glitches, right? So people reported problems right at the start. I didn't have any problems, though. It did go from the red carpet to, like, ABC's 2020 or whatever it is. So maybe we're just, like, on the wrong channel, but I don't think so. But people reported having problems right at the start with either frozen and or pixelated images. But mostly it was fine. Until near the very end. So we're getting right to the, down to the wire. And they're announced, and they're going through all the nominees for Best Actress. And they did the first one. I forget who it was. And then they get to the second one. And it was Carla Sofia Gason's. And they're showing a clip from Amelia Perez. And the TV just goes black. And then a thing comes up and says, "Thank you for watching this program." And everyone was like, whoa, what? So it was only fitting it was Carla's clip. That she's like this bad luck omen for the Oscars. Apparently there was some scheduling issue where it was like scheduled to just automatically stop. Like if I'm just a schlub and I do this live stream every Tuesday and I've done it every week, almost every week for over a year, and someone's getting paid like 6 figures to do this broadcast and handle like the live streaming on Hulu. I look, workers' rights, but also I really hope someone gets fired. Because, like, how do you fuck that up? Like I just don't understand. And I got a quote here from Houston Coley, someone on X, who posted, quote, "Sean Baker gives a speech about why movie theaters are better than streaming services, and then Hulu goes down right before Best Picture is announced. Case in point," end quote. And yeah, like, we had to pull up the show on someone's phone. So, like, I basically just listened to, like, the last 10 minutes of the broadcast. So that was really annoying. And again, it's, like, not the end of the world, but, like, I'm struggling financially, and I do this show for fun, and someone's getting paid 6 figures, and they just had, like, a timer? Like, come on. All right, so that's enough of my bitching and moaning. So let's talk about some highlights of the awards themselves, right? Again, I mentioned most of these already, but there's a couple other wins here that I just wanted to highlight. Paul Tazewell won for Best Costume Design for Wicked, which was exciting because he was, as he made very clear in his speech, he's the first black man to win in this category. That's kind of cool. The animated film Flow won Best Animated Feature, which is really cool because it was a very small movie, small budget. It was basically just made in Blender, right? Which, like, basically, if you would need the skills, but, like, a normal person could make this movie, right? They didn't have access to any special resources or anything. And, they're really, taking Disney's lunch money in a sense. I think I read somewhere that this is like the 3rd year in a row that Disney, whether it's through their own label or Pixar, it's like the 3rd year in a row that they have not won this award. Which is fine because you think of Disney as like the like it is American animation, right? Or just an animation for most people in general. No Other Land won Best Documentary Feature. This was a documentary highlighting the struggle of the Palestinians, right? And the guy who went up, who's Palestinian, really, without being like, fuck Israel, fuck the United States, was very, it was really cool to see on the Oscar stage, like, someone actually getting to, give voice to the powerless. And, that would imply that he is giving it, like, he is part of this group, right? It was kind of somewhat not undermined, but it was somewhat complicated because apparently the film was made as kind of like a Palestinian-Israeli kind of cooperative. And then the Israeli producer came up and basically kind of peddled the same, like, oh, both sides need to lay down the blah, blah, blah. And, like, look, I'm against violence, right? So equating what, terrorist groups have done to Israel with what Israel as a country has done to the Palestinians for almost a century, feels like a false equivalency, right? But you gotta say that stuff at the Oscars, because like Hollywood is very much pro-Israel. But it was still very much at least cool to see. And to be fair to the Israeli producer, he did kind of call it out where he was like, like he and I are so similar, but I live under civilian rule of law, and he lives under military rule of law. And I can't be safe until he is free. Right? So that was really cool to see on a national stage like that. Of course, Adrian Brody won Best Actor. He made history in a couple ways. He made history. He's the first actor to win 2 Best Actor wins on his first 2 nominations. So he's only been nominated twice in this category. I think ever, right? But in this category, and he's won both times. That's kind of cool. But another record that he has broken is his speech. It is super long. In fact, the music started to play him off, and not even like right away. It was like maybe halfway through, and he basically was like, "Turn the music off. Like I've been up here before," right? And apparently it is now the longest speech in Oscar history at 5 minutes and 45 seconds. So, the tweets write themselves of like, oh, the speech was just as long as the brutalist. Oh. But, it was a pretty long speech, and it wasn't particularly interesting, right? I think I saw someone tweet being like, it's so great because Adrian Brody is one of the greatest actors one of our greatest living actors. He's also one of like the stupidest people ever. Like he just had like nothing to say. Like he shushed the orchestra and then went on for another 3 minutes and basically just said nothing. Like he just really had nothing interesting to say. Other records being broken with Sean Baker winning 4 awards for one film, right? Which is a new record. Walt Disney himself, who I believe holds the records for the most Oscars like for a lifetime. He had won 4 awards in one night once, but they weren't all for the same project. So Sean Baker now kind of gets to claim this mantle. And it's really interesting because obviously Sean Baker's been making movies for 10, 15, maybe even 20 years. This is the first time he's been nominated. So to go from being a first-time nominee to winning 4 awards in one night and breaking this record is really cool. For Best Actress, it was interesting to see Mikey Madison beat out Demi Moore. I was really not expecting that. Not that I necessarily wanted Demi Moore. My pick would have been Cynthia Erivo. I don't know why I'm such a Wicked stan, but I wouldn't have necessarily picked Demi Moore. I appreciate her commitment to the role in The Substance, but I didn't find her performance Best Actress level, right? But it seemed like that was where the momentum was going, right? That she had won the Golden Globe for the comedy portion of that. She was winning other awards. It seemed like Hollywood wanted, because oftentimes the Oscars are less about awarding the best in the category, more about like sending a message, right? So that's why sometimes you'll give people Oscars for a work that isn't necessarily all that great, but it's kind of to award them for their entire career. Where they maybe should have gotten Oscars. So think like Martin Scorsese with The Departed, Leonardo DiCaprio with The Revenant, things like that, right? So it seemed like, okay, maybe the Academy is going to do this to award the idea of older women, like the themes and messaging of The Substance. Instead, we basically got the plot of The Substance for this younger, quote-unquote more attractive actress beat out, middle-aged Demi Moore. So that was kind of funny. But I was not expecting it. Though, again, while I don't know if I would have picked Mikey Madison, I'm not upset by this pick, because she was really phenomenal, right? Very happy to report Amelia Perez only won 2 awards. Thank God. After 13 nominations, it seemed like it was going to sweep. And, the whole thing kind of imploded. I would say primarily because of Carla Sofia Gasson's tweet controversy, which I did a video about on this channel you can go check out. But even besides that, I think just people realized, oh, this film actually isn't very good, right? And those 2 awards were Zoe Saldana for Best Supporting Actress, which I'm not upset about, right? Because I thought she really put her all into that role. And I just love Zoe Saldana in like everything she's in. So, I'm happy to see her get her flowers, though it is a little concerning because the film has been criticized for being offensive to both trans people and like Mexico and like Mexicans. And when you win an Academy Award, you don't just like go back to your seat. You go to like a little press room where you like take like more. You like maybe make a longer speech and take questions from reporters. And a Mexican report basically was like, how do you respond to Mexicans like myself finding the film kind of offensive? And she was kind of dismissive. She was just like, I'm sorry you feel that way. That's like the worst kind of apology. When someone's just like, instead of apologizing for the thing, they apologize for how the thing made you feel. She's kind of just like, I'm sorry that you felt like, offended. That was not our intention. To which I want to be like, is it, like, rarely is it anyone's intention to offend somebody. Like, usually it's unintentional. But she was basically like, it's not really about Mexico, blah, blah, blah. So it was like a little insensitive to that critique, but, I can't be super, super mad because I just love Zoe. Maybe she's canceled, I'm not sure, but I just think she's neat. And then the film also won the award for Best Song. And it was really awkward because, like, Camille, who's like a French songwriter who like helped with the music, when the three people who wrote the music went up, she's like started singing one of the songs. It's really awkward because it's like none of the songs are really memorable. And when they are memorable, it's usually for a bad reason. So it was just really awkward, and people were like started to cheer, but I think it was more just to like get them to get off the stage. But something that was just really annoying were the speeches just getting cut off by the music, right? Particularly for like these smaller awards. Like, I understand it's a broadcast and people are really here. Most people are here to see those big awards, and we don't want to use up a bunch of time to, have the costume designer give an 8-minute speech, right? But, maybe you would have more time and you wouldn't get criticized for the broadcast being too long. Is like, maybe instead of having a lengthy James Bond tribute, or instead of having like these laborious award intros where the person will come up and just talk for like 8 minutes about each nominee, or like do like a weird skit or something. Give the winners more time to speak. Like, I'm not talking about 10 minutes, but instead of giving them like 45 seconds, give them like 2 minutes or something, right? And again, a lot of these people who are getting short-shifted are the ones. My friend Jake, I don't know if you're watching this, Jacob, but he was here, and he put it best, where it's like, it's a shame because the people who get the least amount of time to make speeches are the one who need the platform the most, because they're especially like the live-action short film winner. Like, they are up-and-coming filmmakers who could really use that moment, and like give them their due. Like, this might be the pinnacle of their career, and you're basically shuffling them off, right? So that's really unfortunate. But that's a basic overview of the 97th Academy Awards. We're really close to the 100th. I wonder if that one's gonna, I'm sure they're gonna really lean into that, but I wonder if it's gonna feel important or majestic, right? But I think this host of nominees and then winners, the fact that Honora, a 2.5 hour dramedy, not even a dramedy because that makes it sound really quaint, like this kind of, Pretty Woman meets Uncut Gems, drama comedy about a sex worker, not only winning Best Picture, but winning all, like having this huge sweep. It really speaks to the effect that has been seen by the Academy following Oscar So White, the Academy, opening up the Academy membership to make it more diverse when it comes to, ethnicity and sexuality and gender and age, most importantly, right? Just that most of the Academy were just like old white men who rarely saw saw a lot of films, and when they did, they were a very specific kind of film. So I feel like we're really seeing, we were already starting to see the fruits of that, but I feel like this really solidifies the impact that decision has made. Okay, before moving on, I just want to give another quick plug to a podcast I do with my fiance Viviana called Now That's What I Call a Franchise, where we pick a film franchise and we go through every single installment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. This season we're doing Middle Earth, which is a lot of fun. We just did our episode on Return of the King. This Friday we're going to be starting up The Hobbit, the first of the Hobbit, a trilogy at least. It's a lot of fun. If you go check that out, you can find us wherever you get your podcast. You can also just find us on YouTube if that's your preferred way to podcast. You can also just find us in the description down below. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 2. So a report from Puck the publication, claimed last week that Kathleen Kennedy, president of Lucasfilm, shepherd of the Star Wars franchise, was planning on stepping down as head of Lucasfilm by the end of this year. And it seemed like, it seemed to be semi-confirmed, because the Hollywood Reporter, for example, talked to a source and they confirmed this information. What was weird, though, is that she then later publicly discredited this rumor. And Deadline ran an interview with her, but it started with this long preamble, basically calling out the reporter from Puck, basically being like, that guy has had it out for Kathleen Kennedy, and predicted something similar last year and nothing happened, blah, 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 blah. And then they go into this lengthy interview with Kathleen Kennedy. And speaking to Deadline, she said, quote, "The truth is, and I wanted to say it loud and clear, I am not retiring. I will never retire from movies. I will die making movies. That is the first thing that's important to say. I am not retiring. What's happening at Lucasfilm is I have been talking for quite some time with Bob, meaning Bob Iger, and Alan, as in Alan Horn, about what eventual succession might look like. We have an amazing bench of people here, and we have every intention of making an announcement months or a year down the road. We are in lockstep as to what that's going to be, and I am continuing," end quote. Though again, it's weird because so many other publications picked up the story. And seem to, in the Hollywood Reporter's case, seem to confirm it on their end as well. So this is weird. So either these sources were misinformed or misunderstood, or this is pure PR spin. Just a little bit of background on Kathleen Kennedy. Again, a lot of people forget this because most people didn't know who she was until she took over Lucasfilm. I certainly didn't. But, she's a very accomplished producer, along with her husband, Frank Marshall. And she's produced, and executive produced especially, dozens and dozens of projects. And here's just a very small selected list of films that she was the active primary producer for, or one of the primary producers, including, but certainly not limited to, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, The Color Purple, Hook, Jurassic Park, you're seeing a Spielberg trend here, The Bridges of Madison County, Twister, The Sixth Sense, War of the Worlds, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, Lincoln, and more. And Lincoln was really the last big one until, she took over Lucasfilm and basically focused just on Star Wars and to an extent Indiana Jones, right? Again, like I said, she became co-chair of Lucasfilm in 2012 along with George Lucas, and then shortly, just a few months later, she became the president of the company once it was sold to Disney. And she's currently 71 years old, right? And she's been in the role for over a decade, right? For context, Bob Iger, I think, is 74. These people need to retire, right? So I'm not trying to age shame or be ageist, especially to a woman, but I feel like, it would make sense that she's entering the sunset part of her career, right? And whether this is true or not, right? Because part of me was because I was going to do this as a story, and then she came out and publicly was like, this is not true. I was like, should I still do this story? And I decided to do it. And the reason why is I think the story is not that she might leave, but the story is that this rumor sparked so much, the fact this was a major story that all the trades were reporting on, speaks to her tenure as president of Lucasfilm, right? She's been heavily criticized for how she's handled Star Wars. And it's weird because it's kind of like me being political in the way I am, where I'm viewers, I try to make this very clear up front. I'm very, very far left. The Democrats are really conservative to me. So sometimes I'll be criticizing Democrats and Republicans will agree with me. And I'm like, yeah, but we're not agreeing. We're saying the same thing, but for very different reasons, right? That's how I feel about Star Wars, Kathleen Kennedy, because a lot of the hate, or the most vocal hate for Kathleen Kennedy, is really coming from misogynists, right? Who blame her for making the franchise woke, quote unquote, which again, if you've watched this channel before, you know how I feel about this, that making the casting of something diverse does not make it woke, right? It's pushing a political message. But Star Wars, if anything, it's become less political than it was, back when I was growing up with the prequels and stuff, right? So when people say political, they really just mean seeing people of different genders or ethnicities. So is the message just black people existing? Is that the message, and you don't like that message? Like, people wouldn't say that, but like when you really just parse everything down, it begs the question of like, well, what is really the political messaging that you're upset with here, right? So that's not why I don't like Kathleen Kennedy. My issue, and a lot of more reasonable people have pointed this out, is just I've criticized her just complete lack of creative vision, right? Famously, the sequels had no clear roadmap of what they wanted to do, which is just fine, but you should at least have an idea, and then you can break away from it, where it seemed like they really were just kind of doing whatever felt right in the moment, and so many projects have felt very corporate-y and very safe. And there was something kind of, charming about the old Star Wars canon, where that, the quality varied, and, the level of canonicity wasn't always consistent. But because of that, it was like this sandbox, and some really interesting stuff could be made. Whereas now, the new Star Wars canon under Disney is very, like, synergistic, and, like, very, coordinated when it comes to marketing and brand, but not coordinated in terms of like, what is our vision for this world and these characters, right? Famously, so many Star Wars projects, it's like a running joke, Star Wars projects getting announced and then either quietly or sometimes even explicitly getting canceled, right? And to be fair, a lot of this critique, so a lot of her tenure has been highly scrutinized and sometimes unfairly scrutinized, right? Because at the end of the day, they're not curing cancer. It's Star Wars. And I say this as one of the biggest Star Wars fans. Star Wars is the reason why I'm interested in not just films, but just stories, right? But I have to understand it's not curing cancer. So the amount of attention that the corporate maneuverings of this franchise, the fact it's been so heavily commentated on, right? Like, people have built careers out of being like Disney Star Wars haters on YouTube, right? Because they know rage sells, right? So again, but nevertheless, I think everyone can agree that, at least creatively, because of course the sequel trilogy did make a shit ton of money, right? It obviously dwindled from film to film. But, I mean, the first movie, the Force Awakens becoming, like, I think it's like the second or third highest grossing movie of all time. Like, that's an accomplishment. But at least from a creative standpoint, I think everyone can agree that this was, a big missed opportunity. So I think why the story, why this became a story, even if it ends up not being true, is because it's exciting to think about where the franchise could go if it's in the hands of someone new. And in a lot of ways, and maybe this is like the Sisyphean, right? Who's the Greek hero guy who pushes the boulder up the hill? Perhaps this is like a never-ending cycle, because this is kind of like how Star Wars fans felt right up until the Disney buyout, where people being like, if Star Wars could just be wrestled away from George Lucas, it could be good. But nevertheless, it is exciting to think about, like, because then it becomes a hypothetical limitless possibilities rather than something that is real and tangible that exists, right? So Hollywood Reporter notes that Star Wars Celebration in Tokyo this April is expected to showcase the future of the franchise. So maybe that's where she'll announce her retirement, or if they announce it before officially, that then maybe they'll announce who's going to take over for her, right? Speaking of which, who could take over? It could be Dave Filoni, right? The co-creator of Clone Wars, and he's creator of Rebels, and has worked with Jon Favreau on The Mandalorian. To that end, Jon Favreau maybe could be the one. The issue, though, more so Filoni than Favreau, but, the thing about Star Wars is that you need someone who can handle both the creative and the business side, whereas Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are more like directors and writers. So it would be an interesting, maybe it would be better if they picked like one creative and one more business person, right? Another name that's been thrown around a lot that feels like it would be like an obvious easy choice, but maybe like too easy, would be someone like Kevin Feige, right? Obviously the mastermind behind the MCU. Disney might go, okay, well, he made that a success, let's just put him over here. Which, A, it was successful, but had a shelf life, because we see the MCU was really struggling to win over fans. But also the MCU is just a completely different beast, right? Whereas comics, it's baked in to have a bunch of these parallel storylines happening all over the place. And, the idea theoretically is that knowledge of them all enhances your experience, but it shouldn't be required reading. Star Wars is just a different beast, right? And if anything, the issue with the new approach to Star Wars has been that it's tried to be too much like the MCU, right? So I don't know if that would really work out. But again, there's this sense that anything else would be better than what it is now, if for no other reason than just it would be a new direction. There was an IndieWire article, written by Christian I apologize for mispronouncing the name, Blauvelt. And the article was titled, quote, "If the Kathleen Kennedy era at Lucasfilm is ending, its legacy is unfulfilled promises and unfair expectations," end quote. And I think that sums it up perfectly. That, there was a lot of hope in 2012 that really was not capitalized on. But at the same time, I think our expectations were a little too high, because Star Wars is like my favorite, like The Empire Strikes Back, Revenge of the Sith. Like, these are like my favorite movies ever. So it's a pretty high expectation to be like, oh yeah, Episode 7, if it's not one of my favorite movies of all time, it's a failure, right? So, I don't envy her job by any means, but there's definitely things that could have been done way differently. And there's also just things that, no one was going to be happy with. And a lot of the hate that she gets is because she's a woman and the franchise has necessarily gotten more diverse during her tenure, which again, I think is a good thing all around. You just got to make good movies to back it up, right? You got to make it so misogynists and racists, they can't point to the quality of the movie, right? They have to purely rely on their own prejudice. They can't be like, yeah, look, and the movie sucks. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 3. So John Lithgow, apparently it's John Lithgow, not Gow. I've been saying it wrong this whole time. John Lithgow has confirmed that he will be playing Dumbledore in the upcoming Harry Potter TV series for Max, formerly known as HBO Max. Sidebar, can we just agree that this picture of John Lithgow, he looks like James Gunn? Like a balding James Gunn? I just noticed this with that beard, right? But anyway, back to the story here. This had been reported previously, but now it's more or less been confirmed by Lithgow. And he said, quote, "It came as a total surprise to me. I got the phone call at the Sundance Film Festival for yet another film, and it was not an easy decision because it's going to define me for the last chapter of my life, I'm afraid. I'll be about 87 years old at the wrap party, but I've said yes," end quote. Technically the deal is still in the works, but it seems like it's at a place where he's agreed to do it. They're just like ironing out the details of the contract and compensation and things like that. But again, he mentions this idea that, it's going to take up kind of this last part of his life because this is a huge commitment, right? Because this Harry Potter TV series, it's going to be a big ordeal the way that the film series was, right? Where, 8 films, basically across a decade, and, they had to cast like 11-year-olds, and they kind of grew up with the material. And this is going to be the same thing, though I really am worried for them because it's a miracle that those films turned out as good as they did. And obviously the quality varies from film to film, but like on the whole, the fact that they turned out as good as they did and the child stars were fairly well adjusted and didn't flame out before you could finish the franchise, the fact that all worked out was nothing short of a miracle. So trying to do it again feels like you're just asking for trouble, right? And it's going to be the allure of this, if you will, is that they're going to be expanded adaptations where, each season covers one of the books. So you have a lot more time to, you don't have to leave as much on the cutting room floor, theoretically, right? I really wish they would do something completely different. And I've talked about this on the channel. Like make it animated or something, right? Like give us something that the films can't give us beyond just expanded material. Because if I want that expanded material, I can just go read the books. So I feel like give us something new when it comes to the medium of film. that it makes, I feel, and that also solves your problem of the aging, because that you could then, cast older actors to play, younger ages, as opposed to having to hire like 11-year-olds and just hope that they don't become assholes or, they don't flame out, like I said, right? The reason why Warner Brothers is even making this is because they're realizing they can't really rely, like the franchise, they're squeezing it and they're not getting as much juice out of it as they used to and as they would like, right? They can't rely on prequels and spin-offs to keep the brand alive. The Fantastic Beasts movies were disappointing, both commercially, critically, and most importantly commercially. Most important for them. And then the Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, the sequel play experience, has been very financially successful, but has received kind of lukewarm critical reception. So, basically Warner Brothers probably feels like we need to remake or do a new adaptation of the original books. Otherwise people are going to stop giving a shit. It hasn't helped that J.K. Rowling has also flamed out her career by just being an aggressive transphobe, but that hasn't helped. So I think Warner Brothers is hoping this can kind of be like a factory reset, a palate cleanser, if you will, right? Notably, no other casting has been confirmed. I did a video about potential casting for Snape, but again, that was rumored at the time, and we haven't really heard anything much since then. So this is definitely an interesting choice. Notably, though, he's not British, right? And I don't know if the films had any major characters played by non-British actors or Irish, right? Or part of the British Isles, if you will, right? And some people have, this is a very offhand speculation that I saw on Twitter, but someone brought up the idea that they're having to expand their search because people just don't want to be in this, whether because they think J.K. Rowling is toxic or they just don't want to commit, like John Lithgow, referenced, commit for 7 years to a project, right? So it's they've had to kind of expand their potential roster. But with all that said, I think this is actually really good casting. I think he fits the character well. I've never read the books. Well, that's not true. I think I read the first 3 or something as a kid. And I'm not a huge Potterhead by any means. I've always really liked the movies, and some of them are some of my favorites. But I'm not an expert on how these characters should be characterized necessarily. But my understanding of Dumbledore, Lithgow can kind of bring a likability, and authenticity, while also being this authoritative figure, being mysterious, kind of, maybe morally ambiguous in certain ways. Lithgow is able to kind of walk that line and kind of not only give both, but do both at the same time. In some of his roles. So I think this is just purely on a casting level. I think this is really interesting. Now when this thing will actually be made, who the hell knows? Because they're still, again, still trying to cast out the main adult characters, let alone the child search, which I know they started recently. So who knows when we're actually going to see this thing come to fruition. Okay, if you want to give just another quick plug to it, I have another YouTube channel called Peter Squared, where I cover topics related to film, media, entertainment in a more structured video essay format. The video I have up right now is called A Closer Look at Frozen, where, you guessed it, I take a closer look at the Disney film Frozen, taking a look at what went right, what went wrong, and everything in between, using these cartoon versions of this old and young version of myself. It was a lot of fun to make. I'd really appreciate if you go check that out. Let me know in the comments why you disagree with everything I said. You can find the link to that in the description down below. Let me grab a quick drink here. Okay. Let's talk about story number 4. So YouTube has revealed that podcasts on the website bring in 1 billion with a B, 1 billion monthly active viewers. This isn't an exact statistic. They basically extrapolated this from the 400 million with an M, extrapolated from the 400 million hours of podcasts seen monthly on living room devices, like a TV. And I guess they kind of just worked out the numbers from there. And they also claim that YouTube podcast, is the most frequently used outlet for podcasts in the United States. And The Verge notes that this 1 billion viewer figure completely surpasses Spotify and Apple. And they put out a statement saying, quote, "This milestone underscores how YouTube has come to play an essential role in podcasting for creators and audiences, and how our investments to improve the podcast experience on YouTube are paying off," end quote. And so, the reason why I want to talk about this story is because it speaks to two things. One, it speaks to the dominance of, or really speaks to three things. So number one, it speaks to the dominance of podcasts just in general. I've talked about this on the channel before. Podcasts, I remember when they were more of a smaller niche thing. People don't know this. The word podcast literally comes from Apple. Instead of a broadcast, it would be a podcast. So it would be like a little recorded radio broadcast for your iPod. And that's why it's called a podcast. But then I guess they didn't trademark it. So it can now just be used by anybody. And I obviously wasn't there at the dawn of podcasting, but I remember listening to podcasts from like IGN, like Podcast Beyond, about Sony and PlayStation stuff, like at the late 2000s, right? And it's just changed so much since then. Has just become such a huge platform. I mean, it's been talked, it's been, I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but it's been talked about a lot how, this past presidential election was like the podcast election, that, candidates going on podcast or podcasts talking about the candidates really played a major role in swaying public opinion. It's a lot more intimate than a regular radio broadcast or TV show. It's a great opportunity to connect with audiences and build a more intimate relationship that isn't as constrained by like time the way on radio or TV broadcasts, it's a very structured time limit, whereas a podcast, you can kind of just do whatever you want. So it really speaks to how, that's a lot, 1 billion monthly active viewers. Now again, that probably a lot of that is repeats, right? But the world population is 8 billion. So even if it's, way less than a billion, it's still just a huge portion of the people on planet Earth partaking in this, right? The second thing this speaks to is the dominance of YouTube, right? Arguably, YouTube and Wikipedia are the best things to come out of the internet. Obviously YouTube has problems when it comes to content moderation and shitty content or actively harmful or bad content, but just the framework that it provides, I think, has completely changed the world. That and Wikipedia are like the two things. There's talks of Google potentially, maybe not so much now. Who knows what's going to happen now that Trump's in the White House. But there were talks of Google maybe being considered a monopoly, needs to be broken up. If YouTube were to be spun off from Google, I think it would be just fine. I think if anything, I feel like YouTube is one of the main, I'm sure I could find this out for sure, but I would imagine YouTube is a main contributor to Google's bottom line, right? And what makes YouTube so powerful is that it's a major competitor it's not only just involved in a bunch of spaces, it's like a major competitor, whether it's podcasting or music or television or streaming, like the most viewed television, Netflix is not competing with Hulu or Disney Plus. They're competing with YouTube, right? Apple and Spotify are not competing with each other. They're competing with YouTube. YouTube is kind of like this, ultra competitor for literally every company in these spaces. And all this say, all corporations are evil, but at least on YouTube, creators can make money off the site. I think they get like half, if not like maybe 55% of ad revenue. It's just hard to be eligible for ad revenue, which is why you should share this video so I can get more subscribers and more viewers so I can finally make money off of this and my parents feel like I'm not wasting my life away. So that's that. And then the third thing I think this really speaks to is the video component of podcasting, which, because that's the thing, is that, for example, I have a podcast. I mentioned, I have a podcast I do with my fiance, Viviana. called Now That's What I Call a Franchise. You can find the link in the description below. I have it set up that it uploads to YouTube as well, but it's just a static image. But what's become really popular is having video podcasts, which, like, to me, it feels like a misnomer, because at that point it's just a video, right? Like it feels like it undermines the definitions of this medium. That, you know, if there's a video component, you know, is it really a podcast anymore? Like, nevertheless, most people don't care about semantics and definitions like that. They want to not only build the relationship through audio, but they want to be able to see their favorite creators and commentators and see their expressions and see their personalities visually. So, you know, Spotify has, you know, been trying to grow their video podcast. I'm not sure if Apple does it. But, you know, obviously YouTube is best positioned for that because it's a video sharing platform first. So, you know, all of these factors kind of just create this stew to where we get to this point where YouTube is just dominating the podcasting space. So, I imagine that this is only going to be the beginning. I feel like they're going to keep growing even more. To the point where maybe that is what's going to compel the government to break up Google. That YouTube is just going to keep growing and growing. I mean, now it was founded in 2005, so we're entering its 20th year now. Maybe it's time. It's done a lot of really huge growth under the Google. It's basically been with Google almost since the beginning, like in 2006. Maybe it's time for it to really step outside of Google and become a major media player. And it already is, but become an even larger player in this space. Okay, let me grab a quick drink here. Okay, let's talk about story number 5. So Michelle Trachtenberg has died at the age of 39. Really sad story. Her mother found her unresponsive in her bed. First responders came and declared her, I believe they declared her dead at the scene. It's not being investigated for anything suspicious. You know, and we're not really sure why she's died. The New York Post has sources that say that she recently had a liver transplant. So some are theorizing that maybe these were complications related to that transplant. So, you know, she's had a very, you know, interesting career. She started as kind of like a Nickelodeon star. She was, you know, on the adventures of Pete and Pete. She was in the Nickelodeon theatrical movie Harriet the Spy. Of course, she would then later go on to do more teen-focused and young adult content like Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She was in the Disney movie Ice Princess. She was in Gossip Girl. And probably the thing I know her the best from is 17 again. That's probably the only thing on this. I think that's the only thing on this list I've actually seen. Though I do remember seeing commercials for Ice Princess. I always thought it was a Disney Channel original movie because they would just always show commercials for it on Disney Channel. Her final role was in the Gossip Girl reboot from a couple years ago. And as you can see from this photo, I'm not sure when this photo was taken, but as you can see, she doesn't look like she's dying, but she definitely, you know, her appearance seemed to raise some concerns, particularly like in the last year of her life on social media. And she even addressed these concerns, you know, when she was still alive, saying, quote, "I received several comments recently about my appearance. I have never had plastic surgery. I am happy and healthy. Check yourself, haters," end quote. And we're probably never going to truly know why she has died. Because, again, she's just so young. That's what made it so, like, I don't even know her all that well when it comes to her work. But just seeing the headline was just so striking at age 39. We're never going to probably really know because the family has you know, rejected doing an autopsy for religious reasons. And, you know, if the police suspected anything suspicious or foul play, they would override the family's wishes to do an autopsy. But since there doesn't seem to be anything suspicious about it, you know, we're just never going to know the cause of death. So it's just really, really sad to see, you know, an actress, especially one that started off as essentially a lifelong actor, you know, leave us so suddenly and so soon. So I, you know, rest in peace to Michelle. I, you know, send out my condolences to her family and those who knew her. And it's just a shame that her life was ended so suddenly. Okay, so that wraps up the show. Just want to give one last plug to Cineman Q. So it's not just a YouTube channel. It started as and still is a Substack newsletter where I publish written reviews by either myself or my good friend Jacob Boblet. He recently put up an article as kind of like an obituary to David Lynch, which was really well written and touching. So definitely recommend you go check that out. You can find the link in the description below. You can also just go to your browser, type in cinemanqso.substack.com. Once again, thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please like this video. It really helps with engagement and the algorithm and people finding the channel. So if you have found the channel, why not subscribe? We're trying to grow this community as best we can, and that maybe one day I can make a couple dollars off of this. Until next time, peace out.